Yes, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Initiative for Information Arts and Culture Development in Nigeria, I am pleased to welcome you to Day 4 of the 2020 Nobel Dialogue Series. Today, we will be discussing the groundbreaking accomplishments of this year's Nobel laureates for economics and the relevance of their work to mankind. To commence the session, I'd like to please invite our chairperson, Mr. Soji Arimoro, to please give the opening remarks. Mr. Soji Arimoro is the managing partner, ARI Professional Services. He is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, Nigeria, and a member of the Institute of Fiscal Association, Rotterdam, Netherlands. He is also a distinguished member of the Executive Council of our initiative, ISCD Nigeria. Good evening, Mr. Soji Arimoro. Please, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening. I welcome you all to 2-week dialogue on Initiative for Information, Art and Cultural Development in Nigeria, IACD. You are most welcome. The mission of the IACD is to facilitate the access of growing numbers of Nigerians to the best that has civilization, provision of books, exhibition and sponsorship of concerts, development, mobile support, and capacity building. It is in the pursuit of this mission that informed this dialogue. The 2020 Nobel Prize of Economics has got two great prize winners in the name of Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson. These two great minds, with their groundbreaking research, have brought about improvement to auction theory and inventions, thus giving birth to new auction formats, as stated by the Royal Swedish Academy of Science. I quote, "The new auction formats are a beautiful example of how basic research can subsequently generate inventions that benefit the society," the Academy said in a statement. The new discovery benefit both the sellers, buyers, and taxpayers all around the world. The Nobel Economic Prize winners further stress the need for collaboration among scholars, which in turn could be beneficial to all mankind. To Dr. Sheung, auction theory and simplest form understandable to a common man. I wish to use this medium to reiterate my esteemed appreciation to our sponsors, the Dawn Commission, Zatec Limited, and Mosuro the booksellers. Also, my sincere appreciation goes to our special guest, His Excellency Carl Michael Grans, the Swedish ambassador to Nigeria, also to His Excellency Not Elvin Lin, the Norwegian ambassador to Nigeria, and also to our very own 1986 Nobel laureate winner, Professor Wole Soyinka. I enjoin you all to enjoy the dialogue. Thanks.
Memory of Alfred Nobel. Prize in Economic Sciences was established in 1968 by the Bank of Sweden, Sveriges Riksbank, and it is awarded by our Academy for work of eminent significance in the field of economic sciences. I'm Göran Hansen, I'm the Secretary General of the Academy, and with me today is, on my right, Professor Peter Fredriksson, who is the Chairman of the Prize Committee for Economic Sciences, and on my left, Professor Tommy Andersson, who is a member of the committee and an expert in the field of this year's prize. This year's prize is about auctions. Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel jointly to Paul R. Milgram and Robert B. Wilson for improvements to auction theory and invention of new auction formats. And you have pictures of the laureates on the screen. Paul Milgram was born in Detroit, Michigan in the United States. He received his PhD from Stanford University in California, and he remains at Stanford nowadays as Professor of Humanities and Sciences. Robert Wilson was born in the town of Geneva in Nebraska in the United States. He got his PhD from Harvard University, Massachusetts, and he's currently Professor Emeritus of Management, also at Stanford University in California. And now I'd like to hand over to the chairman of the prize committee, Peter Fredriksson, to make some remarks about this year's prize. Peter.
Thank you, Göran. It's an honor for me to introduce this prize. Auctions are tremendously important. Every day, they allocate astronomical values between buyers and sellers. They affect all of us, perhaps more than we think. For example, it's likely that you bought your home in an auction. Moreover, the amount of your electricity bill is influenced by daily electricity auctions. Since auctions are so important, designing them in the right way is absolutely key. The work of Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson has allowed us to construct better auctions. They've applied auction theory to more realistic settings. Their basic research allowed them to invent entirely new auction formats. These new formats have been used in complex settings to the benefit of societies around the world. Professor Tommy Andersson will now describe their contributions in greater detail.
Tommy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Göran, and thank you, Peter. Auctions are everywhere. People use auctions to buy and sell different items on popular internet auction sites. Electricity markets are organized as auctions. Financial assets, CO2 emission allowances, and radio spectrum are sold at auctions. But different auctions have different objectives. Some sellers may want to maximize revenue. Other sellers use auctions as a tool to achieve other objectives. For example, to increase bank liquidity, to reduce emission, or to maximize some kind of public value. The auction theory provided by Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson is key for understanding how these objectives can be reached. In the 1960s, Robert Wilson started to investigate auctions with a common value, that is, a value which is unknown beforehand, but in the end is the same to all bidders. Consider an auction for fishing rights, where different bidders compete for fishing quotas. The value of the fishing quota is not only determined by the volume, but also by the price for fish. But this price is unknown at the time when the bidders place their bids. So they must estimate the common value of the auction. And the most optimistic bidder may therefore overestimate the value and overpay for the object. This is something known as the winner's curse. Robert Wilson's research helps to explain how rational bidders in common value auctions should place their bid to, on the one hand, maximize their own expected value of the auction, while avoiding being struck by the winner's curse. Look at this painting. It's a beautiful painting, but it's also a bit scary, right? I'm sure that if you would buy this painting, you would think about the future resale value, that is the common value of the auction. But I'm also sure that before you resale it, you will put it on your wall and you would admire it every day. That is your private value of the auction. In fact, most auctions have both private value and common value components, including all examples I have given you here today. In the beginning of the 1980s, Paul Milgrom started to analyze auctions with common and private values. His research can help us, for example, to rank all standard auction formats in terms of their expected revenue. But it can also explain things that we observe in practice. For example, that sellers often share their private information with the bidders, like test drilling results and inspection protocols. The auction theory developed by Robert Wilson and Paul Milgrom has been instrumental when designing new and complex auction formats. The auction designs by Milgrom and Wilson have been implemented all over the world to sell, for example, radio spectrum, fishing quotas, airport landing slots, electricity, and emission allowances. But designing these types of auctions, it is very complex. Suppose that you would sell radio spectrum to teleoperators and consider this map of Sweden. Some bidders in this auction for radio spectrum may only be interested to buy licenses in the north of Sweden if they at the same time can be guaranteed to get licenses all the way down to the south. Other bidders, they aim for local or regional coverage. So in this sense, the different licenses, they complement each other, but they complement each other in different ways for different bidders. So how can you then design an auction that takes these complementarities into account? How can you facilitate bidding? How should you update prices, and how should you select the winners? The first successful auction format that at least attempted to answer most of these questions was an auction format called the simultaneous multiple round auction. It was designed by Milgrom and Wilson in 1994, and it has since then been used all over the world to allocate, for example, radio spectrum. So, to summarize, thanks to the rich theory by Paul Milgrom and Robert Wilson, trained analysts can today design new auction formats, and practitioners can choose more wisely among existing auction formats to the benefit of the buyers, the sellers, the end user society as a whole. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, we'd like to introduce our panelist. Dr. Seun Paseda is a lecturer in finance, University of Ibadan. And our moderator, Dr. Abayomi Ilori, is a lecturer of economics, University of East Anglia, Norwich, England. You're welcome, sir. You can have the floor. Thank you. Dr. Paseda.
Okay. I can have the floor.
You can proceed, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm trying to share the screen now. Can I share my screen? Yeah. You disabled participant sharings. Can you enable it, please? host disabled participant screen sharing. That's what I'm saying here.
Okay, we'll rectify that now.
Okay.
So I'm sure you can please try again now. Should be fine now. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to appreciate the organizers of this event for inviting me to come and discuss the contributions of this year's laureate in economics, an advancement in auction theory and improvements to auction formats. I also want to appreciate, my seniors at the University of Ibadan, the distinguished service professors, as well as other scholars in the department. I also want to welcome all the participants to this meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the contribution of this year's laureates borders on auction and auction formats. Now, I begin with the conceptual and theoretical backgrounds for auctions. Auctions theory is an applied branch of economics which deals with actions in and attributes of auction markets. In auction theory and auction practice, there are specific rules, or what we call numerous auction designs, that border on information and the formats of the auctions. Auctions can also be defined as games with incomplete information or universality and anonymity, depending on the auction format. Incomplete information in the sense that the party that is initiating the auction, that we may call the auctioneer, does not have full information about the potential bidder's ability and willingness to procure the auction object. Universality in the sense that there might be no ring fencing in terms of the expected characteristics of the bidders. Anonymity could arise where is a case of closed bids and the identity of the bidders is unknown to other participants. What is the interest of scholars in auction theory and in designing of auction formats? Scholars basically concern themselves with improving efficiency in allocation of the auction object, as well as optimal outcomes in terms of the objectives of the auctioneer. Optimality in the sense of perhaps to maximize revenue if it's in the case of a private auctioneer, or to maximize both revenue and deliver some long-term societal benefits if it's in the case of a public auctioneer. Equilibrium bidding strategies, as well as revenue comparison of alternative designs, that is alternative for auction formats. The best format, the best auction format is relative, is a function of the auction object, is a function of the design, is also a function of the outcomes in terms of the delivery of the goals and objectives of the specific type of auction. Why is auction generating recurring Nobel Prize attention? Because it is so important towards pursuit of efficiency and delivery of long-term value to the society. The father of auction theory, as we know it in the body of knowledge in economics today, is William Vickrey. William Vickrey won the Nobel Prize for the year 1996. The award was announced for his contribution to the economic theory of incentives under asymmetric information. Unfortunately, 3 days after the announcement, that is October 11, it was announced on October 8, 1996, that William Vickrey will be sharing the prize for that year with another economist, James Mellis. But on October 11, 3 days after, William Vickrey died from a heart attack, and then he could not deliver the lecture in December. Thus, Paul Milgrom had to step in the shoes, had to step in to deliver the lecture for William Vickrey. So it's going to be a wow moment for Paul Milgrom, a very rare honor and privilege to be delivering a Nobel lecture twice in his lifetime. Yeah. John F. Natch was also a contributor to this dimension of research, but not directly to unction, but to what we call games theory, because he advanced the discussion, a rigorous formulation, a rigorous analysis of auction theory could not begin until there had been a formulation of the strategic behavior or interaction of participants or bidders who are trying to bid in order to win. That is what we call games theory. Games theory is a study of the mathematical model of strategic interactions among rational bidders. So that is why we mentioned John Natch, his contribution being towards non-cooperative games, and then Rain and Selten, John Assign. Coming to this year's laureates, we have Robert Wilson and Paul Milgrom. Robert Wilson and Paul Milgrom have been of Stanford University, will be sharing this year's prize for their contribution to auction theory and in designing better and practicable auction formats. What was the contribution of William Vickrey? We will talk about it much later. And how did Robert Wilson and Paul Milgrom advance the theory beyond the level, beyond the path that was earmarked by William Vickrey? We will talk about that as we proceed. Now, these are familiar auctions examples. We have a case here where 2 licenses are being auctioned, in what we may call a spectrum auction. There's a small license and there is a large license, and there are 2 bidders here. Just a simplified version of the familiar auctions example. Bidder A places a bid of $18 for the small license, whereas bidder B places a bid of $8 for the small license. For the large license, bidder A places a bid of $22, whereas bidder B places a bid of $15. Who wins the license for A and for B? On the face of it, one could say bidder A takes both licenses on the basis of the bids submitted. But in economics, usually efficiency and competition may be alternative objectives of the auctioneer, especially where it is a public sector, so that marginal values may count. And in that case, bidder A wins a license, wins the small license, because the difference between the value he has attached is just 4, 22 minus 18. Whereas the differential in the B case, the bidder B case is 7. So that bidder A takes the small and bidder B takes the large license. The same thing happens here because marginal values, count. Now, these are the laureates for this year. They are both from Stanford University. Robert Wilson happens to be the doctoral advisor or supervisor to Paul Milgrom. So it's a case of father and son being recognized. Yes, academic father. One could see the doctoral supervisor as the academic father to Paul R. Milgrom. Now, the historical background for auctions. Many of us are familiar with auctions, from various backgrounds. The father of history, Herodotus, had documented the existence of auctions as far back as 2,500 years ago at ancient Babylon. The Roman Empire also had this practice where creditors used auctions to dispose confiscated assets from delinquent debtors. That is akin to where bankers collateral or security obtained from debtors or from borrowers. So delinquent debtors, they are the same as what we call defaulting loans or defaulting borrowers, what we call sometimes non-performing loans. So creditors used auctions to dispose those confiscated assets from the delinquent debtors. Also, as Stockholms, we had auctions back, founded by Swedish Baron Claes Rallam in 1674. That auctions market, that auction setting is still in existence as we speak. That is why it is the oldest survival in our world. Auctions back auction a wide range of commodities, from arts, paintings, fine gallery of paintings and all of such. Other parts of Europe, for example, in 1744, Samuel Baker and George Lane sold books worth 826 pounds via auction in London. That is what we call the Sotheby's. The Sotheby's. The Sotheby's currently is headquartered in New York City, United States, and is one of the largest brokers of fine and decorative arts, jewelry, real estate, and collectibles. Sotheby's operation is divided into three segments. We have the auction segment, we have the finance, and the dealer. The interested reader can click on the link there to see the range of commodities and items that are traded on Sotheby's. The other auction items include farm produce like fish, cattle, fresh flowers. Also licenses like the right to fell trees or timber for rubber making industries, or minerals. The right to either prospect the existence of minerals or to develop and to dispose them, such as we have extractive rights or prospecting rights. The same thing with petroleum. We have prospecting rights being sold to some companies and individuals in certain countries, as well as mining rights being granted to some. Petroleum, then radio frequencies, that is, the right to transmit information in a wireless manner. All of these rights are valuable. They have commercial values. And the objective, a primary objective of the auctioneer, where it is a public sector, is to deliver not just maximum revenue, but to pursue efficiency, to deliver long-term social benefits. Other areas where we have seen auctions, we include the sale of items on eBay and also initial public offerings by some companies such as Google. Many of us are familiar with the Google story. Google was established around 1998, but the search engine company did an IPO about 6 years after, 2004. And instead of utilizing the services of conventional investment bankers like the Morgan Stanley and the likes, it chose to embrace auction with a starting price of $100. At the end of the day, the method for allocation of the shares of Google was by the highest price that led to the sale of all the existing shares. And there were about 20 million shares for sale that year in 2004. That was a way of displacing the activities of these so-called investment bankers, such that the commission and the likes that will have accrued to the institutional investors through the activities of the investment bankers was captured by the issuing company, Google, as well as the other investors. We also see auctions in the sale of government bonds. For instance, treasury bills. Treasury bills, government all over the world sell treasury bills as instrument of monetary policy to tide over some level of fiscal deficits, temporary deficits, and the likes. Treasury bills are typically sold through what we call auction, and in which case the successful bidders get allocation. Those who bid higher, in this case by way of interest rates, might lose out on the bids. In addition, we also have cases of government agencies confiscating some items, and at the end of the exercise, in order to tidy up and free their premises from confiscated items, they auction those confiscated items. A clear example is in the case of the Lagos State Traffic Management Authority that recently auctioned 45 vehicles that were seized for traffic offenses. If you drive across some of these last mile offices, we find there various confiscated vehicles. But recently, through that link, there is this story captured by Punch or Guardian that 44 vehicles were sold, and the owners of these vehicles were also given the right to participate in the auction. Now, auction theory overview. What are the major areas, what we may call theoretical framework for auction? What are the major points of emphasis when researchers are attempting to study auctions? The first aspect borders on auction rules. 3 factors influence auction items, and the first, we talk about auction rules, in which case we ask ourselves, are the bids open or closed? That is the first question, because there could be open bids, in which case all other participants are able to see the identity of all bidders, and they are able to see the content, the characteristics of the bids in terms of the values being placed. Or is it closed, where we have sealed bids, like in the first price sealed auction and the second price sealed auctions? The next question is, how many bid times do we have? Because certain items are auctioned in multiple rounds. The most common auctions that we are familiar with in our world, they are the single round auctions, which may run from like few minutes to many days or even months, single round auctions. But in some cases, we have round 1 and a winner is declared, but that's not final. There will be another round 2, round 3, and round 4. That's why we ask sometimes, how many bid times? What price does the winner pay? That's another key question that researchers focus on when they are dealing, researchers and practitioners alike. They consider, what price does the winner pay? Their own bid or the second highest bid? In most auctions, it is the highest bid that the winner pays. But in a victory auction, which is also called the second price sealed bid, the second price auction, the winner does not pay his own bid, but the second highest bid. Auctions are generally supervised by an auctioneer The other aspect borders on the object being put out for sale. It could be single object or interrelated objects, like we have when we are dealing with radio frequencies and as well as spectrum auctions. Another key factor, and in fact, in many of economic analysis, is uncertainty. What information do different bidders have about the object's value? Auction theory attempts to explain how these three factors govern the bidder's strategic behavior, what economists call optimization, that is, what position or what outcome will benefit the bidders the most, as well as the auction outcome, that is the equilibrium that results from such behavior. Auction theory also offers insights on value maximizing design. But like we said, what is a value maximizing design for a private sector auctioneer may be entirely different for a public sector auctioneer. It is difficult to determine when multiple objects are auctioned off simultaneously. And that is where the contribution of this year's laureates have made us, has actually brought about the award, because their contribution through the designing of new bespoke auction format has led to significant innovation in auction practice, as well as pursuit of societal values and competitive and efficient markets. The auction types, the most popular is what we call the British or English auction, in which case prices move in an ascending manner. The auctioneer has a base price and they keep increasing from one price to the other. And some bidders exit if they consider the prices too high. The prices quoted being too high will lead to some bidders exiting, and the winner eventually takes the highest, or the winner makes the highest bid. So the English auction is that auction type where the prices are quoted in ascending order from low to high prices. We have the Dutch auction. The Dutch auction, also sometimes called the clock auction, in which case prices are stated from the highest level to the lowest level in descending order. Both English and Dutch auction are typically open bids. They are typically open bids. First price auction. The winning bidder pays the highest bid. The final price is the highest bid in a first price auction. The second price auction, also referred to as the victory auction, the winner does not pay the highest bid, but pays the second highest bid. In public procurements, for instance, we may have closed bids, where bidders often place sealed bids, as well as, and the procurer eventually selects the supplier that promises to provide the service at the lowest price, given specific quality requirements. The winning bidder in public procurement, for instance, waste management, is that provider of service that promises to provide the service to clear the waste at the lowest price, given specific quality requirements. What are the key questions here? Which is the best auction format? Like we said, for a private auctioneer, the objective is profit and wealth maximization. For a public auctioneer, beyond revenue or profit and wealth maximization, where the public auctioneer is concerned with the delivery of long-term societal benefits. These are some of the questions in auction analysis. What is the bidder's best strategy? The bidder does not know, because like we mentioned earlier, in auction theory, we are dealing with games of incomplete information. And when we are talking about games, we are talking about the interaction that exists among these strategic rational rational economic agents. Bidders are assumed to be rational. They will prefer more profit to less, and when they have to pay, they will prefer to pay at the least possible price. They will prefer to pay the least possible amount. Do bidders believe the object is worth more or less than others? That's another key question. These are the vital questions. Do these different valuations reflect possession of superior information by some bidders? There are some objects that have private values attached to them because the value that the individual attaches to such items, the value is independent of the value that all other bidders may attach to such object. That is the idea of idiosyncratic valuation. The value that is attached to a particular item or service, such as paintings or collection of artwork, may be unique to an individual who loves such items, who loves perhaps antiquities, who loves paintings and all of that, because it gives such individuals psychological benefits. Then we have another dimension to auction valuation that we call the common value, in which case the bidders have different private information about the value of the object or license. But the exposed value of such items or objects is identical across all bidders. The exposed value being identical, and in such cases, we have common value components in the case of mineral rights, in the case of real estate. Any object whose resale value is of importance to the potential bidder is an object that has a common value component. It is not unique to the individual, because if the individual bidder wins the bid, the individual bidder is also thinking ahead, anticipating about the potential resale value when the useful life, what accountants call the useful life of the object, is over. So can bidders cooperate and manipulate the auction in order to keep the final price down? That is another key question in cooperative games. In order to avoid what we call the winner's cost, in which case the winning bidder pays so much more than the actual worth of the object, all the potential bidders could engage in what we call a tacit collusion. A tacit collusion, that agreeing that they won't bid too high, that they will not bid too high in order not to pay too much for the auction object. How can regulators and governments design auctions in order to maximize social value? That's another question. How can auctions facilitate sale to the most appropriate buyer or procurement from the most appropriate sellers? All of these questions were adequately dealt with by the laureates of today. The laureates we are celebrating, who will be receiving their awards and making the presentation next week. All of these questions have been adequately addressed in their theoretical work, and in fact, also in the designing of auction formats. The Nobel Prize is typically given to scholars who have made important discovery or an important invention that benefits mankind. And in the case of the laureates that we are celebrating today, whose work we are discussing, they tend to have occupied both dimensions, not just in the discovery, which we call the theoretical work, the scientific work, but they also helped to design better auction formats suitable for the use of of governments and authorities in the sale of complex items or complex objects, usually interrelated objects, such as spectrum auctions, as we proceed, we will get there and see, the extent of the, the advancement that this year's laureates have brought to the practice of auction, not just to the theoretical analysis. This is the work. On this page, I discussed the private values, the innovation of Vickrey in this 1961, the work he did in the early 60s, where he analyzed all the 4 auction formats and derived an interesting result under rationality and risk neutrality that he called revenue equivalence theorem. Revenue equivalence theorem. Vickrey was able to prove under certain conditions that all the 4 auction types that we mentioned earlier, the English auction, the Dutch auction, the first price auction, and the second price sealed bids, they will yield, all these types would yield the same revenue to the public auctioneer. That is what they call the revenue equivalence theorem. And this is also similar to what we also call the Miller and Modigliani theorem in finance. All of these results happen to be startling results. They were not expected. They were surprising results. I mean, in the Miller and Modigliani case, we are talking of irrelevance of debt or irrelevance of capital structure or dividend policy in the valuation. In the Vickrey revenue equivalence case, Vickrey was more or less proving that whether you utilize the English auction or the Dutch auction or the first price auction, the second price auction, the revenue that accrues to the auctioneer is equivalent, irrespective of the auction type. It was also able to derive a powerful result that we call strategic equivalence. Strategic equivalence in the sense that the first price auction and the Dutch auction will lead to optimal bidding strategies. Optimal bidding for the bidder, in which case we talk about the absence of strategic dominance. For the first price auction is equivalent to the Dutch auction. Also, the second price auction being equivalent to the English auction, in which case the exact bid is identical to the private value. The limitation, a key limitation of the Vickrey analysis was that it was concerned only with private value auctions. It was concerned only with private value auction. Auctions where the value attached to the object is subjective and is independent of the values that other individuals or bidders may attach to such object. And a key example to that is a privilege to sit with a celebrity, to have a dinner with a celebrity, or to collect some rare antiquities, some very old objects. Some people attach so much importance to old objects, what we call antiquities, and so on and so forth. So Vickrey's analysis is so restricted that it does not apply to objects whose resale value. Anytime we are talking about resale value, we are talking about values that other market participants may attach. Any object that can be sold in what we call a secondary market cannot be analyzed with the private values independent model of William Vickrey. Common values. The essence of this page now is to lead us to the innovation that Paul Milgrom brought in from his analysis of the 1960s. Common value auctions are auction objects that exhibit interdependencies, such as securities, licenses, and property rights. At the beginning, ex ante, all bidders have different private information regarding the auction object. But at the end, the value attached to the object is identical. It's identical for all the potential bidders. Bidders possess different private information. The examples of such include treasury bill auctions, IPOs, spectrum auctions, paintings, arts, and antiques. Individual bidder can assess the object value faster if given access to other bidders' estimates. But in actual fact, the other bidders like to keep their bids secret. Bidders in common value auctions face what we call asymmetric information risk, in which case other players may have superior information about the true value. In cases of asymmetric information, it might result into a bidder, even if the bidder wins, paying too much than the object or license is worth. The phenomenon where bidders pay so much more than the intrinsic value of the object or item, that is what leads to what we call the winner's cost. Even though the winner wins the bid, the winner is also counting his losses. So rational bidders would avoid what we call the winner's cost by initially placing low bids and also attempting to know or receive signals about the submissions of other potential bidders. As science work in terms of its equilibrium notions in Bayesian games provided strong motivation for the Wilson's common value model. The diagram here describes the winner's cost. Where we have this red line is the actual value of the item. However, the winning bid is placed at the right end here, such that the loss to the winning bidder is the gap from this red sign to the far right side. That is the winner's cost. This is it again in the auction of fishes. Winner's cost in common value auction. We have it here in auction of fishes. The winner is probably around here or here where we have the yes or the no. The final price is around this point. Meanwhile, the real value of the item is this green line or this green gentle cut here. So that is the winner's cost. So what is the loss to the winner? What is the loss to the winning bid? The loss to the winning bid, to the winning bidder, is the difference between the price actually paid and the real value of the item. Robert Wilson's seminal contributions, he pioneered the analytical framework for common values auction to describe bidder strategies. A common example here is in the area of mineral rights or petroleum rights. What was the contribution of Wilson in that regard? Wilson's major contribution was to say that the problem of winner's cost increases with asymmetric information among bidders, such that information disadvantaged players respond by placing the low bid or abstaining entirely from the auction. Mineral rights and financial assets, for instance, are the common examples, real-world examples, when we are dealing with the common values model. A bidder does not know the value or the extent to which certain minerals exist. I want to take an example. Nigeria is an oil-producing country, and I know there are many of us, Nigerians in this event who have connected. There are about 390 oil blocks, according to the Department for Petroleum Resources, DPR. But only 179 oil blocks have been assigned, leaving about 211 oil blocks idle. That is in a case of some of the issues raised by the laureates. There is possibility of winner's cost or auction that is being carried out in a transparent manner is absent. Transparent auction or bidding process is probably absent or probably not done frequently, because according to the DPR or official information, the last rounds of auction for rights, whether mining rights or prospecting rights was conducted around 2007, such that the active oil blocks of today, most of them were actually assigned as far back as the 1990s. We cannot prospect more if we do not grant people the right to prospect. We cannot develop in terms of the production, production in terms of, quantity of oil produced in a day, crude oil. The current estimate is still hovering around 2 million barrels per day. And I know that the government would like to increase aggressively, perhaps to 4 million barrels per day. And at the same time, there are also gas shortages. If the bidding process is operating effectively, there is a possibility that more oil blocks will have been assigned, but they should not be assigned by way of administrative licenses or beauty contests that lead, administrative licenses in the form of random allocation, politically connected companies and individuals, or the beauty contests that lead to lobbying. All of those are inefficient ways of assigning a scarce public asset or public resource, because it typically results into conversion of commonwealth into private pockets. What was the contribution of Milgram? Milgram analyzed cases, the general case, where both private and common values are important in auctions. Milgram made decisive discoveries around this auction. And the key contribution for Milgram was that the revenue principle increases the stronger the link between the bids and the bidder's private information. A major innovation in auction practice was provided in the early 1990s, where the Federal Communications Commission of the United States, similar to what we call the Nigerian Communications Commission in Nigeria, was allocating radio frequency to telecom operators. Prior to the suggestion of Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson, radio frequencies were assigned either by way of beauty contest, in which case potential telecom operators send their applications to the authorities, that is the FCC, who will be analyzing them comparatively, just like the feasibility studies being evaluated in form of an essay, to know which of these telecom operators will deliver the greatest value. But we all know that that process is shrouded in mystery, is shrouded in confusion, is not transparent. Another type is the random allocation of licenses, which was in vogue before, Wilson, Milgram, and other co-authors recommended the use of simultaneous multiple round auctions. When radio frequencies were sold by auction in the US, initially the revenue generated by the FCC was around $600 million when auction was utilized. Prior to that, people were speculating. There were companies and businesses who had no intention of utilizing the radio frequencies, but who would rather apply for such frequencies in order to resell them at the secondary market. That led to a lot of inefficiencies, so that there was a large secondary market and billions of dollars landed in private pockets instead of in the national treasury. There are many innovations to auction theory, but a major contribution of this year's laureates border on the creation of this auction format, the SMRA, simultaneous multiple round auctions. And this is the description of the simultaneous multiple round auction. It was suggested to the Federal Communications Commission for the spectrum auctions in 1994 by the laureates. The main ideas are the auction takes place simultaneously. What are we talking about? We are talking about objects that have geographical and technical complementarities. Objects that have, or licenses, rights to transmit frequency over defined band or wavelength. For instance, in Nigeria, we have what we call radio Inspiration FM in Lagos. If Inspiration FM in Lagos desires to be a national network operator, in which case it will have station at Abuja, it will have perhaps in the north, it will have also in the southeastern part of the country. Different licenses in terms of spectrums, wavelengths in megahertz, not just the 92.3 that we know it for, the megahertz, the frequency that will be attached when it is in a different geographical location will be important, such that these complementarities that can lead to economies of scale and economies of scope can lead to the auctioning of a block of frequency rights simultaneously. That is, Inspiration FM will indicate interest, for instance, in different wavelengths, in different bands for the Lagos, the other parts of the Southwest, or different states, depending on the blocks of the frequencies, as well as, in all other places that may be of interest to the telecoms operator, so that these items are auctioned together as a multiple object or as a multiple license offered at the same time. The multiple round refers to the number of rounds, which is the nature. This type of auction can be auctioned in as many as 3, 4, or 5 rounds. At the end of each round, the winning bid is announced so that other participants are made aware. So how many rounds will be determined by the auction itself. It's also an ascending type, like the English type. The item prices, the stopping rule, that is, the bidding continues until there is no more round where there are changes in the content of the bid. That is, the bidding continues until nothing takes, until there are no more bids, there are no withdrawals, or there are proactive waivers. The activity rules that underlie the SMRA, simultaneous multiple round auction, force the bidders to be active from the start, because some bidders may not know the price attached and they may want to hide their demand until the information is released at the end of the first round or the second round. The number of licenses that each bidder indicates interest in cannot be increased at a subsequent round. That is what we mean by the monotonicity rules. It ensures that bidders cannot bid on more items in later rounds when more information gets revealed. The impact on other fields are numerous. Information in securities market, matching theory that brings to mind Alvan Roth and Lloyd Shapley, also Nobel Prize winners. The auction theory is actually an aspect of what economists call mechanism design, in terms of the design of markets. One part of the mechanism design is auction theory. The other part of it is the matching theory, utility pricing, game theory, that also brings to mind other scholars, Nobel laureates like the Gentile, who was awarded the prize for his analysis of competition, and the use of games theory was critical, was a centerpiece of that contribution to the body of knowledge. So a quick recap as we draw near to the end of this discussion. We did the auction overview, talked about the single object auctions under the Vickrey's model, the Wilson's model that considered the common values, Milgram's general case that brought in both the private values and the common values. The Vickrey's case was a special case of private values. Wilson's case, also another special case of common values, but Milgram was universal. His analysis was universal. It combined both the private values and the common value. And then in the multiple object auctions, the regulator's dilemma is to balance revenue against efficient allocations. And then the competitive market could be a third objective. Heterogeneous licenses could be more complicated, but the auction format introduced by this year's laureates, helps to accommodate all of those complexities. What are their contributions? I mean, the scientific rigorous approach has made auction practice to be more transparent, following metrics, and at the same time, promoting economic opportunity and competition, preventing excessive concentration of limited licenses in the hands of a few. I am done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oluseun Padeseda. We are now happy to take questions, and the floor is now open. And if you have any questions, please can you drop maybe a comment in the chat box, or you could also use your microphone to ask your questions. Thank you.
Dr. Ilori, you want to unmute so that we can hear you, please? Dr. Ilori, you want to unmute so that we can hear you?
Think auction might be up. Can you hear me, please?
Yes. Now we can hear you. Perhaps you want to repeat the question, Dr. Ilori, so that everyone can hear you, sir.
Okay, so I said we'll be happy to take questions from anyone. Maybe if you want to understand how auction maybe apply to your own business, or how we could use auction to talk about how we could use auction specifically to improve systems in the African sphere. In what apart from crude oil, what area do you think that African economy could employ auction to improve the system, basically?
Okay. You want me to respond to that?
Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Okay. Yes. We have mentioned the different dimensions of auctions, where we are especially the type in real life that has both the private value and the common value components. Businesses. Let's take a case of financial institutions, banks, for example, can use auction to tidy up their balance sheet, especially in dealing with non-performing assets, non-performing loans, so-called. If a credit agreement has been well structured in line with what the bank may call the risk asset acceptance criterion or criteria, that also gives room for security, in case of eventualities. Ordinarily, we say that collateral, what we call security or collateral, does not really make a bad credit good. We typically say that in banking. But collateral would make a good credit better. A good credit better because all the possible issues that could lead to failure or default on a loan or an advance to a customer might not have been anticipated by the bank. There can be changes, for instance, in the macroeconomic policy. Maybe at the time when your customer approached you, the bank's customer approached the bank for a loan, there was no policy around, say, border closure. And this particular customer relies on a critical implement or raw material that is necessary in his production process or in his trade. That border closure would affect the business of such a customer. But what happens? The bank can partner with the customer and see if such, loans can be restructured. But where it is in the case of an unwilling and an unable borrower, an unwilling and unable borrower, where character issues are also concerned, whether if the borrower is not even willing to do what it will take to make the credit facility performing or to restructure. If there is no intention to pay back, the bank can seize the asset, can confiscate it, and auction it. That is in the case of a private sector. What about in the case of a public sector, like the AMCO, Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, that was created to purchase bad assets from balance sheets of banks? It's more or less like the modern day banking factor, the factor company. So if this company, Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, can lay hold on the titles of those assets, especially where real estate or properties are involved, those items can be easily auctioned away to the general public, and the proceeds realized from there can be used to clean up banks' balance sheets. So it's just so straightforward when it comes to single object auction, as in the question. But in more complicated or more complex cases, that is when you are dealing with multiple object auctions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pasheda.
Yeah, somebody is raising a hand.
Is there any other question, please?
I can see Benga Oladiro. Thank you. Can you ask your question?
Okay, doctor, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, doctor.
Yeah, good evening. I can hear you. Thank you for joining.
Okay, this is an excellent delivery. My question is this. Yes. In a situation where the highest bidder, the price, the highest bidder is placing on an object is lower to the value of the object, can the auctioneer refuse to release the object?
Okay. Yeah, I would say that is that the only question you have to ask?
Yes, that's the only question I have for now.
Okay, thank you. Let me quickly respond to that. If the auction scenario is working appropriately, most likely the winning bidder will submit a bid that is as close as possible. If there is transparency, if there is wide awareness that a particular object is being put out for auction, definitely interested market participants will show that will also submit bids, because at the beginning we mentioned that auction can be seen as games of incomplete information, universality in the sense that there is no form of ring fencing. In the particular case you mentioned, I suspect a ring fencing, that is, there is limit to the number of people or parties. The auctioneer has specified who can bid in terms of their location, maybe geographically, yes, I would quickly make mention of electricity auction in Nigeria, because in my opinion, the sale of the distribution component of the power sector was not done in the most efficient way in terms of to advance societal interest. In more civilized or advanced democracies, someone has said, for instance, that in London, for instance, the users of power, electricity, in the same house may have access to Scottish distribution, in terms of power, may have access to Irish as well as London and several other, distribution companies. Meanwhile, in our country, Nigeria, the way it is designed is such that if you are in Lagos, for instance, the provider of electricity in terms of distribution would either be any of these two companies, Eco Distribution or the Ikeja. Why can't those companies have access to other areas like the Ondo State or Oyo State? Despite the complaints of the public around their services, they all have different levels of efficiency, such that if all of these distribution companies have the right to distribute across the various regions within the country, users might be able to select, might have the option to select which one among all of these distribution companies is most efficient in the provision of that service. So the kind of auction scenario that you painted is such that perhaps there was a ring fencing or there was a limitation as to who the bidders in terms of their number or their nature or their characteristics. And such kind of auction take place in environments where transparency is not prized. There's no premium placed on transparency and inclusion, where few people tend to dictate what happens in terms of the market, market outcomes. Someone else is raising a hand here. Mr. Gbega, are you satisfied? Okay.
Yes, I am satisfied. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm seeing Mr.
I think there is a question from.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening.
I think there is a question from Ola.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That was a nice presentation.
Thank you,
much
sir.
enjoyed it. My question is, what are the hidden risks involved in auctioning, like a potential buyer? What are those hidden risks that you must be aware of? Because as much as I enjoyed that presentation, you've not really talked about the hidden risks for the buyers.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for that important. That's an excellent question. Yes. Essentially, when we talk about winner's cost in the common values auction, the point there is there's a risk that the winning bid pays too much more than the value of the item. That is clear from the price angle. But what about the quality of the object? The quality of the object, one of the outstanding contributions and significant one for that matter from Robert Wilson was that the auctioneer, that is the party that is initiating the auction, can maximize revenue as the auctioneer the auctioneer is able to provide to the bidders results from expert appraisals. For instance, in the auctioning of real estate, if the potential bidders do not have information about the true value or the true worth of the property, an independent estate valuer certificate the word independent is so important because there's something accountants also emphasize: independence. When an accountant or an auditor is making use of the information of another expert. Yes, for instance, international standards of auditing 620. What factors will the auditor consider when making use of the work of another expert in the area that is not in accounting or auditing? The independence of that expert appraiser is so important for the potential bidders, because if the estate valuer is a subsidiary or a staff of the auctioneer, there is no way you can, say that the appraiser or the valuer certificate, authenticity certification was obtained under an independent, scenario. So that's the point there. So the risk involved to potential bidder, what we may call adverse selection, that is a big word in economics. In cases of information asymmetry, because the bidder does not have adequate information about the true worth of the item, it does not have adequate information about the quality that this item can deliver on what it has been promised to deliver. So that can lead to wrong selection, which is also part of the winner's cost. It is part of, the consequences of markets characterized with information asymmetry. Adverse selection again brings to mind the work of, the Nobel laureate George Akerlof, who analyzed it for used cars, market for used cars, quality uncertainty, Quarterly Journal of Economics, 1970. That's a popular paper in the economic cycle, because used cars, people don't know the actual value, the actual quality of such cars. It's the disposer, the person who is making the sale, that knows the actual performance of such used cars. That's why some bidders or potential buyers take along their mechanics, their auto mechanics, to such car, auto sales centers to say, can you help me check the engine? Can you help me check this and that? Just to confirm. That is when the buyer takes his own expert to such a place to examine the item. That is a way of dealing with the risk of a wrong selection or buying what you may call a lemon. Lemon is the buzzword for inferior commodity in finance and economics. So that's the point, sir. Are you satisfied, sir?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? Any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any hand up now. Well, the time is fast spent, so I will hand over now.
Dr. Ilori. Dr. Ilori.
Okay. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, I'm checking the chat box. There's no question there for now.
Okay.
Okay.
Somebody is raising.
I can hear you. I said there is no question on the chat box for now.
Dr. Adedeji. Dr. Adedeji is raising a hand.
Okay. Dr. Adedeji, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, Dr. Adedeji. I can't hear you.
If Dr. Adedeji is... Can Dr. Adedeji hear us, please?
Hello.
Femi.
Sorry, if Dr.
Yes,
Adedeji can't hear us, so I may have to hand over to Mrs. Adefemi. Over to you, Mrs. Buckner. Derek Bigbe, please.
Femi, please step in to close the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a technical hitch right here. Mrs. Adefemi will join in a moment. She's got a little disconnection, but she's coming on. Please come in now.
Okay, hello.
Yes,
Dr.
you are in, Femi. Please come in.
Yes, I'm with you. I can hear you.
Thank you so much for that very brilliant performance tonight. The presentation was excellent and well delivered. We are certainly leaving this meeting.
This meeting is being recorded.
We're certainly leaving this meeting tonight better informed on insights on auction theory and improvement to auction formats. Thank you very much for accepting to do this. We really appreciate your time and your efforts. We also appreciate our distinguished chairperson, Mr. Soji Arimoro. Mr. Soji Arimoro is a member of IACD, and we also thank you very much for accepting to do this. Our moderator, Dr. Ilori, thank you so much for steering the course of our discussions tonight. We really appreciate your efforts as well. The dialogue continues tomorrow, and discussion tomorrow will be literature. So our panelist is Professor Sally Ball. She will be joining us from the University of Arizona, United States, a student. Also tomorrow, we'll be joined by a special guest, Professor Wale Soyinka, Nigeria's lone Nobel laureate, and His Excellency, Ambassador Carl Michael Brun, the Swedish ambassador to Nigeria. If you have enjoyed these sessions and found them meaningfully impactful, we urge you to please share the words with folks around you in your homes, offices, and your communities. Our initiative operates on a vision of an enlightened Nigerian populace, adequately exposed to what has been taught and written in the world's civilization. Please note that our membership is open to all. We look forward to having you join us. Professor Ball tomorrow will be discussing selected works of Louis Gluck, Nobel Laureate for Literature 2020. We have selected poems of Louis Gluck in PDF version, which we will be willing to share with you tonight ahead of the program tomorrow. So please, if you would like us to send you a copy, we please encourage you to leave your email address in the chat box before you leave this meeting. We couldn't have done this without the support of our partners who have continued to stick by us and with their enduring support. The Dawn Commission, Zafek Group, Mosuro, the booksellers. We thank you so much for your support. Once again, we thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to your participation tomorrow. Have a good night rest. Thank you very much.